Today we're going to be going over a tiered list of the top 10 things photographers complain about that just come off as dumb, stupid, whatever you want to put. They're just, why are you complaining about it? In this list, I just gathered and compiled a bunch of things that I'd seen on Threads, Instagram, and of course in YouTube comments of things people are complaining at me about and just complaining about in general. And I'm going to list them. I guess S is the highest for the most annoying, down to D, which is still very annoying and I don't understand it, but I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, if that makes sense. Film versus digital is the first thing we're going to discuss today, and I'm going to put it here in this little A section. I don't want it to be too high or too low to start off with, but this is one of the more annoying topics that photographers really harp on and just really bring up all the time. I'm not for or against film. I'm for or against film being your personality, and I'm not for or against digital. I'm for or against the digital camera being your personality, and I feel like that's what this lines up as. If your images are shit, it doesn't matter what you took them on, they're shit. We should really start going back to caring about what the images look like versus the camera that people work on, and you know how hard it is to get the image. I think a lot of people have an issue with digital photographers whenever it comes to them taking photos, because digital photography is very easy. It's the easiest hobby to pick up and be a part of because the camera does 90% of the work for you. And if you shoot Sony, Canon, you know, Nikon, any of these big camera manufacturer cameras, the autofocus is so good it does the work for you. The AI is so good it does the work for you. The low light is so good it does the work for you. You can put the camera in auto and become a professional. It's not that hard. And then on the other side with film, we give too many excuses to people that have taken really bad photos, but because on film it's cooler. And also a lot of film people made their personality that film was so tough to shoot on, and it's really not. And once people figured out it wasn't and started jumping into it, now you have all the film fanboys who are pissy, angry, and who are mad because, you know, they're trying to protect film whenever it's just that they don't feel special anymore. And yeah, it's dumb. It's dumb. So this one is one of the top whenever it comes to being annoying as hell. Number 2 is megapixels. I'm putting megapixels at an S tier. This is the very, very top. Plain and simple, the conversation around megapixels is just dumb. It's dumb. People act like before we had 30, 40, 50 megapixel sensors, you couldn't print anything larger than an 8x10, and it just makes me laugh because it shows me who hasn't printed shit in their life. I think of whenever DSLRs first came out in the digital age, and we had 4 megapixel, 5 megapixel, 8 megapixel, 10 megapixel cameras, and how huge of a deal they were. And I think about how when people had those, as well as when they were still shooting film 35 millimeter and scanning them on 12 megapixel scanners, people were blowing these things up to billboard size. They were still blowing these things up to, 60 inch by 48 inch prints, 20 by 30s, and you're still able to do so today. I just think it's hilarious. There's a video online of someone using the Leica M8 and they printed out a huge 60 inch print. I just think it's hilarious how people will tell you, oh, you need more megapixels to be able to print big and be professional, because when someone tells me that, I just know they've never done that shit in their life. And it's just annoying because the megapixel conversation is really ran by people who are talking out of their ass and don't know what they're talking about. And honestly, those 24-ish megapixel cameras are not only great for anything you're doing a professional job, but they're also so cheap right now because they've been so devalued that you can pick up a stunner like what I'm shooting on right now, or this camera right here, and no one will be able to tell the difference between that or a high megapixel camera because no one else gives a shit. All right, the next one is going to be sharpness, and this one bothers me, the conversation around sharpness, but like I get it. I've used lenses before that had some internal issues, and so sharpness wasn't there. I thought I'd hit it and it wasn't what I needed to be. Whenever it comes to photos and things like that, I think that sharpness is overblown. Henri Cartier-Bresson, as much as I don't like him for how he treated people, he did have a great baller line, just straight bars, whenever he said that sharpness is a bourgeoisie concept. I don't even know what that means, but it's just basically sharpness, just it doesn't matter. It's hyped up a little bit too much. For the people that love lens sharpness, I get it to an extent. Like, I love Zeiss lenses because of micro contrast and the sharpness that looks like it comes out in those lenses, but it's not the end all be all of an image. Honestly, if your composition isn't good, you're gonna be shit. The same thing with film versus digital, same thing with megapixels, same thing with sharpness. If you have a sharp digital high megapixel image that looks like shit, it still looks like shit. And so sharpness, as great as it is, it's one of the least honest to God, one of the least important things about an image that you could even have any conversation about, period. 10-bit log. This one is up there. It's right there in the middle, actually. And it's the lack of 10-bit log that I'm talking about people complaining about. You guys just don't know how to color grade well, and I'm just going to say that very, very candidly. A lot of times people complain about a feature being missed and they're not even taking full advantage of the feature, or they're using the feature wrong. A lot of times I see people and they see 10-bit log and they think, oh, I can f up a shot, clip my shadows, clip my highlights, and still be able to bring it back. And when they don't, they blame the camera system, they blame the sensor for not being good as this sensor, when it's honestly your fault for just f***ing this whole thing up. I learned to color grade from Denver Riddle using 8-bit footage on a Sony a7S III or a7S II, and then shooting on Canon C300s cinema cameras. And those cameras were lower bit rate than what I'm using today. They didn't have amazing flat profile. You know, there wasn't a whole bunch of range to push and pull and really work with color on those, but they did the job. And that camera was used along with the 5D Mark II, I think, to shoot like House, Iron Man 1, and you see how great those things are. And it's kind of funny, 10-bit log is honestly the same way that 4K UHD is it was so hyped up at first, and now it's kind of commonplace. And to go anywhere beneath that, like 1080p, or to go back to 8-bit log, people are just afraid and it's automatically unprofessional, when that was an industry standard for almost 2 decades. So yeah, no IBIS. And no IBIS this is one that the only time I have an issue with the conversation about no IBIS is when the conversation about IBIS happens to be about consumer grade entry level cameras and people are shitting on a manufacturer for not including IBIS. I think that's kind of unfair and also just very, very funny. Not everything has to have every spec whatsoever. There are some cameras that I would absolutely love to have IBIS on there, especially if they're being geared as more vlogging or video centric cameras. Like Fujifilm's XE4 was already built to be worse than the XE3 in build quality. Had a lot of changes that people didn't feel great about, but it was marketed as this kind of vlogging camera and had a flippy uppy screen. That's a camera that needs IBIS, 1000%. It looks way better to have no IBIS in some cameras than the IBIS in other cameras. I had a Sony a7 III that had IBIS and it looked horrible because of all the jittering and jerking. And even every trying to fix stuff in post, sometimes having IBIS in your camera doesn't make things look as smooth, and just a weighted handheld rig would actually do better. But I think it's just because people haven't been taught that. People have been taught that IBIS will always, you know, it's a fix-all. You don't have to have a camera strap. You don't have to have a gimbal. You don't have to you don't have to put your camera on sticks. As long as you have IBIS, and it should work to where it fixes everything and makes it look cinematic. And that's honestly not true. I understand why it's become such a thing that we're all used to, and I love it. On Panasonic cameras, it's absolutely the best. But you know, the complaints about it and saying that every camera shit if it doesn't have IBIS, even whenever it's the under $1,000 entry-level camera, that's dramatic as hell to me, and that's a complaint I still to this day just don't get. Sensor size. This one is going to be S tier as hell for me. I don't understand full-frame fanboys. I shoot full-frame cameras. I shoot 35mm. I shoot, you know, medium format and things like that. I get it. I get that there are advantages, but the advantages aren't available to everyone if you're not good at what you're doing, and if you don't understand lighting, and if you don't understand color composition, and if you don't understand, honestly, just regular composition within a frame, blocking and things like that. I think that this is overhyped and pushed over the top, and it started because of the whole bokeh movement, and you know, people saying bokeh when they really mean like background separation and blur. I think that the full frame look became a big thing, and the reason why I put sensor size instead of full frame is because people will die on that hill that full frame is better than APS-C in medium format because it's a larger sensor and all the benefits. But if I was to tell them that, hey, digital medium format is bigger than full frame and it gives a better image, I will have people come out of the woodworks talking about their 61 megapixel this camera, their 50 megapixel that camera, their 1.2 this lens, and blah 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 blah. And listen, it has nothing to do with sensor size. It has to do with these digital photographers that make, honestly, their cameras and their brands, Sony and Canon, usually their whole personality. And honestly, if you're making a camera brand your whole personality, there's a reason. You're usually just shit. Sensor size, because it's not really a real conversation. The GH5S does better than a lot of full frame cameras for video, especially with a speed booster, and no one wants to hear that because, well, I have a full frame camera. And GFX and Hasselblad do way better than any full frame cameras whenever it comes to image quality and detail resolution, but they don't want to hear it because they shoot full frame. It's not a real conversation. It's an excuse for people to bitch. Camera cost. This is also going to be S tier. Camera cost is super duper annoying because, I'll keep this quick, if you can buy it, you're not talking about it. If you can't buy it, you're bitching about it, and that just gets annoying. The amount of people that are bitching about the cost of the R1 for what it has, the cost of the M11D for what it has, the cost of the A9 or A12 or A93, one of those, based on, you know, what it has in it. Listen, if you're not going to buy it, it's not for you. Just shut the fuck up. I will defend everyone who, because I used to get mad at this too. I hated when people would bring a Leica M10D versus a X Pro 3, and they would give the nod to the Leica when it's like, hey, we're not talking about how the Fujifilm has autofocus, it has video capabilities, it has cheaper lenses, cheaper entry. It was always just build quality, the look. When I like the look out of a Fujifilm sensor more than the Leica sensor. I'm all for people picking that apart when people are just being dumb and they're being biased and they're not being honest about, you know, what they're comparing. But people that are just bitching because of the price, honestly, just grow up. If you're broke, just say that. And a lot of you aren't broke. You're just on this hill and you've shitted on Leica or Hasselblad or another camera manufacturer for so long that you feel embarrassed that you want that camera and you'll never buy it. So your next thing to do is kind of like a little kid teasing in a playground of someone who they have a crush on. You just talk shit about them and you're mean to them. It's weird. Grow up. Like, get an actual life. Color is kind of like color science and also color cameras. You know how many people I say like, oh, I have to have a black camera to be stealth? You're not stealth. Let me just put this out here. For street photography, whatever it is, you're not stealth just because you're, like, how is this stealth? Me, regular person, now I'm stealth? Now I'm stealth if I have a, like, that makes no f***ing sense. I don't get that. I don't get that. Also, color science is a myth, you guys. Raw imaging, your sensor size matters more than your color science and what the brand is in the front of your camera. Let's just get that out of the way. Raw imaging changed the game. People using presets changed the game. Your color science doesn't matter. If you're shooting straight out of camera on anything other than a Fujifilm, I feel sorry for you if you're not shooting just straight out of camera monochrome. Next up is dynamic range and latitude. And this is dynamic range in digital sensors and latitude in film stocks. This is just ridiculous to me because people just don't know what they're doing. The reason why it frustrates me and it's so high, because I know people will say like, I'm a professional, I need this, this, and this. If you get it fucking right in camera, because I have it right here and I wanted to bring it up, because Ken Rockwell actually did a study on this. Ken Rockwell said that he discovered that if you actually metered and exposed correctly for the image, your image, and I quote, won't look like a piece of shit. Little did you know. There's meters built in cameras, there's meters, you know, you can buy externally. They're like, if the image is messed up, it's on you. We have to stop blaming the gear. It's always just funny to me that like dynamic range is always picked apart when usually it's said by people who don't know how to expose an image. Or, you know, film latitude is picked apart whenever it's like, you know, people who don't know how to work this film. Oh, I want to save my highlights. Why? And I saved my highlights and why are my shadows gone? That's what happens. That's you sometimes you pick one or the other in a dynamic situation or a situation where it's very bright out. Like it is what it is. And I just wish people would just be not gracious towards these things, it's just a weird conversation because it just immediately that tells me like, damn, like just expose correctly. Last one, definitely not least, is TikTok or IG photogs complaints. The reason why this bugs me so much is because there has never been someone who's made a post about a TikTok photographer or an IG photographer who has done so with the intention of anything other than making themselves feel better about themselves. If there are multiple people taking photos at once and so many people have cameras and they're taking photos, does that water down their personal experience? No, it just waters down you feeling like you're special, and that's what it comes down to. All of this conversation, whenever it comes to TikTok or IG photographers, the amount of people that are bitching about that one TikTok photographer, oh, I'm a street photographer, can I take your portrait? I don't care if it's staged. I don't care if it's not what street photography is. If that's not what street photography is, just get over it. They're giving street photographers a bad name or they're confusing people. No one's going home after someone sees that video and looking up street photography and then, you know, seeing the millions of street photography POV and walkie-talkies and blogs and stuff like that and saying that's not street photography. That one TikToker guy, that's the real street photographer. No one's saying that. Who cares what other people do? It doesn't matter. They're a hobbyist. They're an amateur. They're a beginner. Let them do what they want to do. It doesn't matter if they're posting on TikTok or Instagram. Like, no one's seeing your portfolio, dude. Like you hating on someone else for the photography they're doing does not make yours better. It's just funny that majority of the people and I would say almost all, if 99% of the people that complain about TikTok or Instagram photographers, they fall into one of two camps. They are either shit and jealous because other people get attention, or the nepotism babies who have an uncle, a friend, a father, someone who helped them get the job they're in, and they're at a high paying, or they're working an agency job or something like that. They didn't earn it and deserve it, and now they have to shit on other people because they're insecure, because they don't want other people to see that, hey, guess what, the job you're paying me to do that my dad got me, someone else can do it for cheaper, and you'd probably have less of a headache because they'd probably do better. With all that being said, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. This was actually pretty nice to be able to get this off. Hopefully it's not too long, but stuttered a lot, mouth is dry, gonna go get a drink. Remember to take it light, but take it, and have a good one.